So one of the basic ways that DF works is we start out by really welcoming each person's creative solution to date. What they think, their soapbox, if you will. That other processes say, oh no, we don't want people to stand on their soapbox. Whereas in this process, we really want to welcome, listen, draw out, we even call it purge, each person's idea of what it is that needs to happen around here for things to be better. Not because we're going to then sit around and vote on them or try and decide between them or anything like that, but just because if we want to welcome people's creative energies and contributions, we need to start by welcoming all of the creative contributions that they've been doing up to now as they've been sitting alone at night, not able to sleep, thinking, oh my gosh, things in the office are such a mess, what is it that would really work? Because as human beings, that's how we are. We're naturally creative. We're naturally trying to come up with something that will help, right, and contribute. But the thing is, oftentimes we're doing that with only the little bits of information that we have from the particular perspective that we're in, from the particular cubicle that we're looking out of. So the first step in this process is really welcoming each person's ideas, and as we do that, we start to realize that we all have different pieces of information, and we start to get a better sense of what the big picture looks like. So Jim, would you like to take it from here?
Yeah, the idea is to people walk in the room with an energy. There's an energy dynamic that's happening, and that's what dynamic facilitation works with. We want to pull out that energy of the purge that Rosa was talking about, that they have a solution often, or sometimes it's a concern, or sometimes it's just a piece of data. It's an anger, but most often it's a solution, and they lay it out. And what we do is follow, then the energy transforms, and we're basically working with the energy of this issue, the problem. Most processes will work with kind of the cognitively, here's where we are, here's where we want to go. Okay, that's part of it. But really there's an energy that's frustrated or that urgently wants that change to happen. And that's where DF spends its time, is helping that energy unfold. And in the process, I become clear, and I become clear about the problem, and I become clear about myself. And the way we do that is we use 4 charts. We sit people in a room facing the 4 charts, and the 4 charts are basically problem statements, solutions, data, and concerns. And those charts mean that we have really created a space for whatever comes up for people. So people just speak in a natural way, whatever's coming up for them, and we hold a problem-solving orientation around that, using the space, and what they come up with, we put in those charts in a certain way, sometimes in full sentences, mostly in full sentences, and we create a context where everybody's facing the problem and we're all working together, being creative together, listening to one another, trying to figure out what's best for everybody. We just create that dynamic, and gradually people shed their roles and their pretenses, and they become more and more authentic in the process. And the facilitator keeps everybody safe so that people can they find themselves just speaking, and yet it's working out great. It's a wonderful space to be in. It's fun to be in that. I say fun because, I mean, it's just releasing, but of course we're usually working on the kinds of problems that seem impossible to solve, and they're yucky and so forth, so sometimes fun might not feel like the right characterization, but it's enjoyable. What happens is that we're always in a context, and when you're in a parliament, for instance, there's a context that requires a conflict. It enforces a conflict. There's going to be 2 sides. We're going to vote. The majority wins. The other side's going to lose. They're going to get revenge. It's just, that's the way it works. It's structured. Somebody hammered it in place and nailed it to the ground, and now everybody walking in that field is going to be in conflict. You take those same people and you put them in a different conversation, and lo and behold, they have all kinds of shared ideas and like one another, and they become different people. And dynamic facilitation, by its nature, changes the context. We're now in a context where we're all facing the problem and we're being creative together and we're trying to find an answer that works for everybody. In that context, when people are different, polar opposites in the old conversation, but completely different in this conversation, when they have different values, that's an asset. Now that makes a breakthrough more likely than it would have before. So we can argue all day whether we're pro-life and pro-choice. That's structured by the context. But neither one of those answers is actually going to solve the problem. The real deal would be to have both of those pseudo answers and both of those people facing the problem and having them work together and coming up with an answer that meets both of their needs. And then that gets exciting. As long as we're in this context where we have to have a law, it has to be a law, and we have to do it with our parties and our voting and stuff like that. Well, yeah, we're going to get this big argument. It seems like we don't see the system. We don't see the context. We look at it and we see people. So we think, oh, well, gee, we'll never get those people to agree. But that's not even, you change the context and those people don't have to agree. They just are working together to come up with something even better.
Yeah, I think the importance of context is really key, as Jim pointed out, and also that we tend to think of communication in a very transactional mode. Like one person has this thing that they want to say and they say it to the other person, and then the other person has something that they want to say and they say it their piece, and we don't tend to look at it so often in terms of a mutuality and what is the context that we are creating in terms of our interpersonal relationships. And another piece of the theory for me, which I think is really important, is that whole thing of brain science, how there's been so much research that's showing that as human beings, we're incredibly complex and wonderful organisms, and yet we can look at human behavior as being really fundamentally, we're either in a protected state where we're defending ourselves, or we're in a state where we're open and creative. And what brain science is discovering is that those two states can't coexist. If we're feeling threatened, we are in a particular whole reactive state that is very different from the state that we're in that fosters complex thinking and collaboration and creativity and all of that. And those switches can get thrown incredibly quickly. We can shift from one to the other in the blink of an eye. And so, as Jim was saying before, part of the role of the facilitator in the DF process is that instead of talking about the facilitator as a neutral party, we talk about the facilitator as someone who takes all sides. So part of our job is to really join with each person, to really connect with what it is that they're trying to say, to support it, hear it, reflect it back, make sure that we've got it accurately up on the charts. But it's not a mechanical process. It's really one where we are deeply connecting and creating a safe interpersonal space for that person. And so when that person is speaking, they're not speaking from the defended, guarded, reactive space, but we're really trying to elicit that person's deeper creativity. And so as that process unfolds and as each person feels deeply heard and is also able to more deeply connect with their own selves and to deeply hear their own selves, that's how I see the energy in the room starting to shift and people being able to work in this collaborative dynamic where they know that any of their concerns are going to be heard, that any of their ideas are going to be taken into consideration, that, as someone put it, how would it change things if you knew that you did not have to fight to be heard? If you knew that your perspective was going to be seriously, deeply, thoughtfully considered and put out there alongside all of the other ones. And the truth is, it changes things in a radically profound way.